Okay.
Great. Hey, so welcome this evening. I'm Ashley Dinges, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the live weekly Dharma gathering with Shambhala Online. Tonight's session will be led by David Perrin, who's a wonderful teacher based in New York City and a dear friend of mine. So tonight, David's talk will be titled, I Love You and I Might Not Like You, Metta as Liberatory Practice. And we will begin with guided meditation, we'll move into a talk, and then we'll end with a Q&A discussion. David is a meditation teacher and mentor in the Shambhala tradition. He is a mindful lead teacher and director of the Mindful Teacher Training core faculty at the Institute for Compassionate Leadership and co-director of the Teaching Mindfulness Training with Dr. Shantae Smalls and Ethan Nickturn. He's also a licensed creative arts psychotherapist. David serves as a trustee at the Perrin Family Foundation, supporting youth social justice projects in Connecticut. He is committed to anti-racism and anti-oppression in meditation centers, social institutions, and in his own practice. David lives in New York City with his partner, Ann Keenan, and their 3 children. And it is my delight to welcome David this evening. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, so if you are asking a question, please do know that you will be in the recording, which is available within 24 hours in the My Programs tab of your Shambhala Online account. And if you prefer not to have your name used, or if you'd prefer to ask your question via the chat box, you can do that as well, and David will let you know when he's ready for your questions. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome David, and please invite you to teach us.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that I would like to begin by really honoring this space that's been created. This is a relatively new space this calendar year, and just a big thanks and appreciation to Ashley, to Shantae Paradigm Smalls, to Adriana DeFazio, and to the Shambhala Online team, the whole team at Shambhala Online. I think this is a really important space that has been created and that hopefully will go into the future, well into the future. I've been enjoying some of the talks myself, and it's really great to hear lots of different voices, voices that haven't necessarily been regularly heard, or in some cases heard at all, in Dharma centers, in Shambhala centers. So I'm just very grateful to be a part of this and to be able to address this gathering. So tonight we're going to talk about the liberatory practice of metta, which is loving kindness. And I'll say more about this after we do some practice together. But I thought that we could start really in the spirit of the approach to metta that we're going to be talking about tonight, doing some practice in that spirit. So if you would just find a comfortable spot, hopefully you're already in a relatively comfortable spot, but one in which there's some sense of uprightness in your posture. There's really a quality of being able to feel the body. Sometimes starting out, we can feel particular body parts. So feel our feet or our legs. Just noticing where the lower half of the body might be making contact with whatever is supporting it. So whether you're in a chair or on a cushion, on a couch, it's really giving gravity permission to take the body, to hold the body, support the body. And then feeling a little bit of space in the upper half of the body. So just noticing how the belly is doing. Bringing some attention to the center of the chest, to the solar plexus. Permission for the shoulders to drop away from the ears. Back of the neck, nice and long. Softening the muscles of the face so that the jaw can be a bit relaxed, hang out, the tongue is resting in the mouth. As we begin to turn our attention to the breathing, to feeling the body breathing, having awareness of the whole body all at once. So we've gone through the different parts from the lower half of the body up through the head. Just seeing if we can feel the whole body all at once. Feeling one good breath at a time. So the breath coming in and the breath moving out. So that the very act of breathing is a type of awareness, brings us into awareness of how the body's doing. Which might mean there's tension, we might find discomfort, achiness, tiredness, irritability, all sorts of things, multiple things sometimes going on in the body. Breath is awareness. So that when we notice thoughts, we can take an approach or even an attitude of care with our minds. There's a lot going on. And one of the best ways to bring that care, that approach of care, is the breath itself, is noticing the breathing body, breathing into our experience. So that the act of noticing or witnessing our own mind, our own experience, is a type of reverence and appreciation. Given shape by the breath, by the breathing body, feeling that next good breath coming in and going out. Again, this is caring for our minds. Breathing as an act of care. And so noticing where the mind is, awareness of that becomes infused with awareness of the breathing, feeling the whole body. And in these last couple minutes of practice, imagining this quality of seeing our experience, of gazing on our experience. Sometimes for me, it's like the breath is breathing me. And as the breath breathes my body, the appreciation for all that the body, all that we go through in our experience, in our minds. Being able to work with the mind, to hear teachings, to contemplate, to move along the path of a spiritual journey. If you'd like to take just 2 or 3 good deep breaths in your own time, you can do that. So when you're ready, feeling a good breath being taken into the body, and then going out of the body. A good full breath coming in and going out. And one more good full breath taken in and released. Okay, so if the eyes are closed, you could slowly and gently open the eyes. So thank you for your practice. I'd like to tell a few stories tonight. And the first story that I was thinking about sharing is from my high school days. So I grew up in a town called Ridgefield, Connecticut, which is in Fairfield County, the southwestern county of the not so big state of Connecticut. And I had a sense pretty early on that I wanted to leave Ridgefield and explore the world, meet new people. And so I was given the wonderful opportunity by my parents to go away to boarding school. And that's not always a choice that kids self-make or want to make. But in my case, I was pretty ecstatic about it. The idea of going and living at a school and living in a dorm, eating in a dining hall, going to classes, doing afternoon activities, and it all sounded pretty cool to me. So I went to school in Wallingford, Connecticut, and pretty early on while I was there, probably about my second year in, I was 15 or 16 years old at the time, I started developing a lot of friendships with many of the Black and brown students who were there. So this was a school that was predominantly white kids, many kids from fairly affluent backgrounds, like myself. And my friends many of them were part of a group called the school was called Choate Rosemary Hall, that was called the Choate Afro-Latino Student Alliance. And we used to hang out in the Student Activity Center together. We used to watch TV together on weekends. It's just a group that I felt really comfortable in, even though I was, in some senses, a minority in that social group. So I got quite close to some of these friends, and actually one of them, Amaya, and that's not actually her real name, we got quite close and we started dating. Amaya had from a Dominican, Puerto Rican background, heritage from Brooklyn. And we got in a pretty serious relationship. And I heard through the grapevine, or from my friends, that my name was coming up in some of the meetings of this CALSA group, the Afro-Latino Student Alliance, and that basically that there were some people who I knew of but weren't as close with in that group that were upset, actually, that we were dating. And one day one of Amaya's friends pulled me aside, and because I didn't really know what to do. I was upset. I was angry. I was kind of ashamed. It was a whole mixture of feelings. And this friend of Amaya's pulled me aside and said, have you thought like that this might not actually be about you personally? It might be about what you represent. And this was kind of early on in my personal path of identity around whiteness, around skin color. And that notion that there were things that I represented, or maybe even things that I had said and done out of ignorance, out of bias, out of unconscious sort of supposing things about people. That all of that combined together could be a way that I was being seen. And that awareness around race particularly, but also class, gender, being male identified and in a heterosexual relationship. That awareness was coming to me at that particular time, but as is often the case, particularly that racial awareness is much earlier. That awareness becomes much earlier for Black and brown folks, Black, Indigenous, people of color, global majority. And it's even been shown in studies that awareness for those folks is coming early, 3-4 years old. And for someone in a skin color, in a system that doesn't have to think about it and moves pretty easily through that world, through the world in general, but certainly at this boarding school, certain assumptions that were not being made about me, certain comments that were not being directed at me, certain ways in which I was not at danger if I was moving around the campus at night. So stuff that I didn't have to think about, and that often that awareness may dawn in one's teens, 20s, and later. So Amaya and I continued to date actually for some time. And, I maintain relationships with the kids in Khalsa, but there was always a kind of distance, and I felt very self-conscious about it. And there were conversations that never got to be had, and probably due to my own, whether it was shyness or unwillingness to really engage. And so I tell this story because for me, reflecting on identity, reflecting on interpersonal relationships where there are so many different factors at play, there's so much socialization, there's dynamics of power and privilege. That's all stuff that is fortunately being spoken about more and more. And whether it's in Dharma communities, spiritual communities, workplaces, sports teams, schools, this notion of what does someone like me do with that? What's the practice for me? And certainly the practice is getting an education, is becoming educated about the history of these systems of oppression and power. But from a meditative context, more and more I find that the practice of metta is really, really helpful. So one of the matriarchs of the metta loving kindness teachings, Sharon Salzberg, defines this love as a state where we allow ourselves to be seen clearly by ourselves and clearly by others. So we allow ourselves to be seen, and in turn, we offer clear seeing to the world around us. So allowing ourselves to be seen and offering clear seeing to the world around us. Another, I think, really relevant teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh has to do with this quality of attention. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, the most precious gift we can offer anyone is our attention. So in this case, love is attention. Now, we could compare this to the notion of like. And so the title of this talk is, I love you and I might not like you. So in this case, how would we define like? And conventionally, it means to feel inclined towards something or someone. It's a choice, it's a preference. And so Sharon Salzberg talks a lot about, increasingly, I think in her teachings on loving kindness, talks a lot about intention. What's the intention? And in this case, we could ask ourselves, is my intention to be loved or to be liked? Is my intention to be loved or to be liked? Because so much of what I do, and if I think about that story that I just told, it was a real mashup of intentions. There was part of me that did want to be loved, that wanted to be seen. and seen clearly for who I was. And in some senses, those friends, there was something about those friends I felt that saw me clearly in a way that some of my other friends didn't. And there was an attention and loving attention that I received in that group of friends that, again, I didn't find in other places. And then there was also my real fear of being disliked. And so as I've reflected on this, growing up and through my 20s and 30s and getting more interested in racial justice and anti-racism, anti-oppression in general, from any of my embodied positionalities as a white male, hetero male. Is this notion that there's something about me that would like to be considered and like to be seen as the good, nice, respectable white guy. The non-hating, non-judgmental, non-biased straight white man who's not making the same egregious mistakes as we see in stories on the news or in social media. And that, in fact, that you could say attachment, that fixation of mind to be liked, for people to prefer me or to choose me and choose my experience and choose my company over someone who is less woke, whatever the way of describing that is actually a really tentative, fragile, narrow place to stand on. Because I'm secretly hoping that I'm going to be the good person, and in fact, come to realize there are no good, and this is something, sometimes it's not easy to read for white people, to read commentary and teachings where what is shared is that there is no good, nice white person. There is no white person who is above the conditioning that we've all received, the socialization we've all received, and the biases that we all have. And then in fact, that, while it may be difficult to hear, is this notion of what is love and what is like. Metta, loving kindness, also translated as friendliness, goodwill, benevolence, fellowship. It's generally the wish for the safety and happiness of all beings. Sometimes translated as the hymn of universal love. So we visualize, we generate these feelings of love or compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, the four immeasurables: love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity or inclusiveness. We generate those and we visualize various individuals, including ourselves, and we send that out. But actually, in the traditional teachings, loving kindness, metta practice is also presented as protection. And so what is it protecting against? maybe it's protecting against the neurosis of being so fixated on being liked that we're too worried and too anxious to open ourselves up to what might be true about our own history, about actions that we've done, thoughts we've had, speech that we've spoken. And so traditionally, even before you get to the loving kindness part, to sending out the loving kindness and well-being, it's talked about as looking at the actions that we can protect ourselves from and protect others from. And there are 5 different qualities. So the first is non-harassment. Which means not oppressing or damaging. The second is inoffensiveness, so not being offensive, not hurting or injuring another. The third is not torturing, so not subjecting another to pain. And that could be physical or mental pain. Not destroying, so not putting an end to something, not trying to finish and demolish something. And then finally, not vexing, so not causing others to worry or stress out. So in this quest to be liked, in this quest to be the good person who comes from whatever identity of privilege, there can be this fear that one or all of those things will manifest. That we will, even if we're not the direct perpetrator of that we will be a bystander or a witness, that we won't do something, that we won't account for and acknowledge the history of this country. And yet, how can we do loving kindness if we don't open up to those things? And so that what seems like being disliked, our fear of being disliked, or actually being an encounter. I've had experiences at work with colleagues, Black and brown colleagues, who've come up to me and said, you know, I really didn't appreciate when you said that. Or that gesture you just made that you didn't think about at all, it hurt. Asking me to do this or sit over there or consider this, that was hurtful to me. And that fear that rises up in the pious white dude's mind that, oh gosh, how could I have done that? I'm so sorry. I made a huge mistake. I'll never do it again. I'm crushed and I'd like to just go sit in the corner. But that in fact, maybe what felt like being disliked was being loved, because in this definition of love, it's being seen. It's attention. It's being seen for all of who I am. And so we often hear about being called in rather than called out. And this is this gesture of loving attention that says, no, don't do that. Or no, pay attention to the dynamics in the room. And that what happens through that practice of loving attention, what happens through that practice of being in relationship with things that seem scary because they might derail my sense of self as being a good and nice person who's not a racist, who's not a bigot, that what could possibly transpire is a moment of illumination, a moment of being seen that happens between two people. And that small sense of self that I'm holding on to could be liberated. There's the possibility. I could let go of the idea of being the good white guy and be in relationship and hear things that might be hard to hear. But those are the relationships in my experience that begin to be built from a muscle of strength rather than fragility and brittleness. And that in fact, that's exactly the way metta is also talked about, is a strengthening exercise. It brings to fruition merit, and it wears away at self-centeredness, preoccupation, fixation. It's like a solvent that's wearing away at those things. You know, it's interesting because in the Shambhala community, I don't remember as my early years of practicing, particularly the first 10 or 15 years really of practicing in the Shambhala, we didn't do loving kindness very much. And now with everything that we've experienced in our community and the stories of harm and the ways people have been really hurt and the blindness that has gone on and the willful ignorance and all the other things that we're coming to terms with, it sort of makes sense. Because if doing this practice is about attending to, paying attention to these qualities of harassment and offensiveness and torture, destroying and vexing people, that if we actually opened up to the fact that that has happened historically and continues to happen, and we open our hearts to the possibility that it may happen again, and where might it have happened on a micro level in my day-to-day life, my recent life, we open up to those things, that then actually the loving kindness practice can happen. But until we do that, loving kindness might actually honestly be very intimidating. And in my experience, in talking to students, talking to others, sometimes as we get into the practice of loving kindness, we find things that are not so easy to see about ourselves and our views on the world. And so starting from this place of love that's defined by allowing ourselves to be seen clearly and to see other clearly. And maybe that practice can be a powerful tool in doing this anti-oppression work. So I'm going to just pause for a moment and invite any of our attendees if you have a question, either to log that in the chat box, if you'd be willing to share your face and body on the screen with us, be much appreciated. You do that by raising your virtual hand. So keep in mind the opportunity to ask any questions that you like. And I should say that if you're watching this not live and recorded, I'd always welcome and love to speak with you if you have questions or comments. So what I'd like to do is just maybe round out the evening. And again, if there are questions that arise, I'm happy to have a little discussion with that. But in the meanwhile, I thought we could just do a little contemplative practice, touch in a little bit on this notion of metta as seeing clearly and being seen. So the way we'll do this is we'll just invite you to close your eyes. Again, come into that feeling of the body, maybe taking a few breaths. And I'm going to bring to our attention one of the words that I mentioned. And so just like in classic contemplation practice, invite you to just be with the word. So you might repeat the word a few times to yourself. And then you can free associate and see whatever comes up in your mind. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever your imagination does with that word. But just turning it over in your mind a little bit, exploring it, and see what arises. So the word that we'll use is harassment. Harassment. Just acknowledging that, you know, right off the bat, might have resistance to even repeating that word. And so if it's the resistance around the word harassment, then just feeling that. Harassment. Harassment. Maybe there's a scenario that comes to mind, or maybe just a visceral feeling, a gut reaction. Harassment. Harassment. Feeling the body, staying connected to the breath. Harassment. Noticing what's coming to mind, people, places, a feeling in the body, whatever it is. We're going to just take a couple more breaths with this word of harassment, then we're going to just let it go. So when you're ready, allowing the word harassment to go, just feeling the body breathing, feeling a couple breaths. And then I'm going to invite you to imagine just spontaneously sending out peace. That might be directed to yourself, your own body. It might be directed to someone else who came up in your visualization. It might be directed more generally to the world or to an individual in your life. Sending out peace. And again, you can send that right to your own experience. You can send it to a loved one. You could send it generally out to the world. Sending out peace. And taking a couple more good breaths with that. And then when you're ready, slowly and gently opening the eyes. Just feeling the space of the room where you're sitting now. And just noticing what's coming up. Could be a feeling of unsettledness, could be a feeling of contentment and peacefulness. Neither is right or wrong. Just lovingly attending to whatever is or has arisen. So this was a small experiment in perhaps a different way of practicing metta loving kindness than you've had before. And we worked with one word. We worked with the word harassment. But as I mentioned before, there is offensiveness, being offensive, torture, destroying, and vexing. And then in fact, in the classic teachings, it begins by contemplating those, and only after contemplating those gets to the wishes, may all beings be at peace or have well-being. And so I could say that for myself, it's an aspiration to open to difficult feelings, to open to a lot of stuff that we usually secretly hope will go away in meditation. And usually what that means is that if we're secretly hoping it will go away, then we're secretly hoping that it won't come up in our relationships. And that people will like me, they won't think I'm a bad person, and everything will go relatively smoothly. But in fact, I think metta is much, much more powerful than that. And it offers us a sense of strength. And it offers us a tool to engage with these really challenging have been challenging. In some senses, particularly, I would implore those of us who are white identified to really think about using these practices and using this approach to metta to develop the agility and strength to enter into conversations with Black, brown, people of color, indigenous folks. And that I hope that that is work that all of us can look forward to doing in our Dharma communities and beyond. So I'd like to thank you for your attention, your loving attention. And I'd like to dedicate the merit of our time together, our practice, these teachings, to beings past, present, and future for whom the suffering of all of the things we've talked tonight about have in many, many cases that suffering has been unavoidable. And dedicating the merit of this practice so that we can, as Sharon Salzberg says, we can rewrite the ending of the next story to come. It doesn't have to be the same story that's happened in the past. And so may our practice and our exertion and our open-heartedness and our love be of benefit to all beings. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening or your day or wherever you are. And do be in touch. Like I said, that invitation to reach out, you can find me at davidbperrin, Perrin.com. And would love to hear from you and continue further this conversation. And there'll be more teachings and hopefully even retreats to come on these on this topic. So thank you very much. Take good care.